So, hi everyone. My name is Christian Alvarado. I am the manager of peer learning for the Children in Nature Network. Shortly, we're going to be joined by our speakers, Dr. Shirley Green, who's the commissioner of the Department of Recreation and Human Services in Rochester, who is also a part of our Nature Everywhere communities. We're also going to be joined by Sarah Milligan-Toffler, who's the president and CEO of Children in Nature Network, and Andrew Moore, who's the director of Youth and Young Adult Connections um, at the National League of Cities. So thank you for being here. I'm glad you're all here. I'm seeing some people trickle in still. So welcome to our Engaging Institutional Leadership for Nature-Based Strategies event. So this event is in support of our Nature Everywhere Communities Action Challenge, and it's a national initiative to increase equitable access to nature everywhere children live, learn, and play by 100 communities in by 2025. So that's this year. So as many communities as we can get on board, we'd love to have you join us if you are not a part of our Nature Everywhere communities already. So as a reminder, this is an event that's being recorded. So if you are not comfortable potentially showing up on camera, just please turn your cameras off. We'd love to have you all stay muted until our Q&A space. You can definitely use the chat throughout the conversation, and we will try to answer questions throughout, but we may push that over to our Q&A space as well. So closed captioning should be available to you. The chat is enabled, so everyone feel free to comment, share anything you'd like. And also, yeah, so everything is available and you should be able to use the chat. Let's go to the next slide. I want to start by respectfully acknowledging that I'm joining you today from the unceded land of the Tungssis, Quinnipiac, and Wapinger peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We invite you to share the indigenous land history of your location in the chat. If you're not familiar with the history of your location, you can learn about indigenous land territories on Native Land Map at native-land.ca. So in addition to land acknowledgements, here are a few ways that you can support Indigenous people every day. So learn about Indigenous homelands you're on and normalize land acknowledgements, of course. Educate yourself on Indigenous issues. Amplify Indigenous social media accounts to reshare and amplify Indigenous voices year-round, as well as support Indigenous causes and businesses. All right. So I see a couple of things in here. Devin, thank you for introducing yourself. We'd love for everyone else to introduce themselves in the chat so you can share your name, your pronouns, your location, and think about what is one quality that you think makes a great community leader. What is one quality that these community leaders should have? I'll give us a moment to share some of that. Emily's joining us from Chicago. Yes, a great listener. It's great. Andy. Yes. All right. Humbly accountable to their community. That's a great point. Thank you, Kendall, for joining us. Honesty. Great. Co-create with community members. Support needs. Needs to be caring. All right. Thank you. Thank you all for participating and using the chat. All right. So I'd love to share the agenda with you. So right now we're in the welcome and introductions. There's going to be a piece on decision makers as champions is coming up. We'll have a great conversation about engaging leadership. Then we'll give you a few minutes to have a Q&A with our speakers. As a reminder, you can ask questions throughout, and we may pull some as we're having this discussion. Then we talk about the action challenge and how is it that you can be recognized on a national scale to the work that you're doing in your community. And then we'll close with a survey. Let us know how we're doing and what we could maybe do better or any topics that you might be interested in the future. All right. A few more people using the chat. Thank you for doing that. All right. Understands and is open to listening to the voice of a community they serve. Should be a great listener, great listener. Awesome, awesome communicator and consistent. Thank you. All right. So we can move on to the next slide. So there are a few outcomes of leadership engagement and what we really want from that connection. So communities that are working to incorporate nature-based solutions for children's health and development, uh, the support of a government official or school leadership as a champion can really catalyze coalition building. Um, Action as well as project sustainability. So local officials shape communities' priorities. Their support can raise your project's visibility, and it can align it with goals around children's health, education, and equity. And aligning your work with leaders' goals makes it a lot easier to secure formal support. When your nature-based initiatives connect to what really matters to the city and or school leadership, collaboration is more likely. And of course, pledges, resolutions, or proclamations are great first steps. And they can signal a leader's commitment to your nature based efforts. And they can galvanize community stakeholders around your shared vision. And a really good thing that we have on our Action Challenge page, which we'll share later today, we have a great resource on how to get those pledges, those resolutions, and proclamations. And you'll hear some of those things today in our examples with our speakers as well. All right, we can go to the next slide. So here are a few examples of some leaders that you can engage. And some of these you may have already been thinking about, and some of these may already be on your teams. But for someone that may not be sure about who to reach out to, here are some great examples of some public sector leaders and other sectors. So just to name a few, a mayor or city manager, a city or county executive branch agency heads, so parks, public works, libraries, public health or early childhood, a pastor of a church with extensive community outreach, a prominent business person, and of course, a leader of a neighborhood or community-based organization. All right. Thank you all for continuing to use the chat. I love seeing how engaging everybody is. Sometimes we have these calls and it's just so quiet, and I'm just like, oh, I'm talking to my camera right now, and there's no one else talking to me. So I appreciate you all. So great listeners. I'm seeing that. How to compromise and be empathetic. Thank you so much. Looks for the best in the team members. That's great. Okay, so we had a lot of great positive attributes in the chat. So I'm gonna yes, the slides will be available after. When you receive the recording, you will get the slides. I'm going to put up a poll and I want to see your input on this. I think it's great to just have it out there as we start this discussion. Let me share that with you. So, we talked about some positive things, but let's talk about a few challenges, right? So, what's the biggest challenge in engaging institutional leadership in your community? So there's lack of awareness about the benefits of nature. They're not sure what's the benefit of it. So there's a couple competing priorities, insufficient public will and funding, difficulty finding the right champions. So you're not sure who in this leadership space may be a champion for you, or all of the above. I'm seeing a lot of all of the above, which is totally fine. All right, I'm going to leave it up just for a few more seconds. Anyone who hasn't answered, we got like 8 more seconds before we close it up. Melody is saying it's not on the poll, but we're being told lately that it's something is not a core service, it won't be addressed. Okay, so let me end the poll here and share the results with you. So as you can see, most people, about 43% said all of the above. The next one is coming up at 30%, is competing priorities. Very similar to, I think, what Melody was sharing. Like, if this is not at the top of our list, we may not be seeing that as something that we pursue, and it can be very challenging. And I'm sure that in many of our communities that are part of Nature Everywhere have experienced some of that as well. And I really hope that the conversation that we're having today just helps offer some insights, and it helps you just maybe support you with gaining some recognition for the work that you're doing, and of course, help you with some ideas to get the backing of leadership to scale some of your efforts for systems level change. All right, so let me stop sharing the poll. Okay. I think it's a perfect time to bring in our speakers so they can share their approaches with you. All right, so I'm happy to introduce our first speaker that's going to be coming up on our call today. Is a commissioner of the City of Rochester, Department of Recreation and Human Services, Dr. Shirley Green. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, I have a very quick question. I want everybody to know more about the work that's happening in Rochester. And I love that the slides here have some visuals because visuals are so good. So, uh, Dr. Green, would you love to tell us a little bit more about the work happening in Rochester and really who's a part of your Nature Everywhere team?
Well, again, thank you for having me. And certainly I'll begin with first letting everyone know that I have with me Sarah Scott, who is the Director of Program and Park Stewardship within the Department of Recreation and Human Services. And so a lot of this work falls into the department that she oversees. And there's been some things that has happened over the past few years. I joined the department 3.5 years ago, and some of this work had already begun. And working directly with Sarah has allowed us to continue this work. As many people put in the chat, in the poll, it is difficult when you don't have the support of your local government, your community. I will say that here in Rochester, we have been fortunate to have the support of our mayor, who certainly understands the need for nature and want to continue this work. So here in Rochester currently, we are, and you can put the slide up for me, we're connecting Rochester kids to nature. That's been the work that has been happening. And we've partnered with uh, uh, several organizations, including Children in Nature Network, the National League of Cities. We've also working directly with our city school district, Rochester City School District, because what we find is that we want to make sure that, and if you can go back one slide, that our children are exposed to this. And so it's important to know that what we do impacts the children. And in many of our schools, in our school buildings, there's parks and playgrounds around those spaces. And so we think it's important to include them in the work that we're doing. And so a couple of strategies that has been lifted through this work is to increase out of school time for environmental programming. Many of us grew up in a time where we were outside, we explored nature. That's not the case today in many areas. And so this strategy allows us to make sure there's opportunity for young people to be engaged when they're out of school. We have 10 recreation centers, and within our recreation centers, we have a program called Earth Explorers, which allows our young people to be exposed to outdoor. You think about recreation centers, it's indoor play, it's activities, but Earth Explorers assures that we get our children outside. The second strategy is several years ago, we had a group of youth who developed what we call the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights. And you'll see that slide in a moment. But this was created by the voices of young people who recognize it's important to get outside. And so these Bill of Rights are all about different activities that you can do while you're outside. And then the third strategy that we're launching is a Maplewood Nature Center. Here in Rochester, we have several parks and outdoor spaces. And there was one particular park where we have in our Maplewood area which we are creating a nature center. And I'll ask to go to the next slide where you'll see the Bill of Rights. And if you look here, you see that the Bill of Rights include things such as learning to take care of our river, bike riding, fishing, snow, playing in the snow. All of these ideals are important because if we don't have intentional focus, we miss the opportunity to get kids engaged in these outdoor activities. Fresh air is good for all of us. And it's important that our Earth Explorers program, each season they go through these Bill of Rights, and every activity that they do connects to one of these Bill of Rights. The next slide talks about our Maplewood Nature Center. This is a space that we will be opening in the fall of 2026. We were able to fund the majority of this through ARPA dollars 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And so we know that this is happening. I'm going to actually ask Sarah to talk about the Maplewood Nature Center, only because I see the bullets in front of us, but Sarah has been very instrumental to ensuring that this project moves forward. Oftentimes you hear of an initiative, it doesn't go very far over time, but this is something Sarah has had her hand in the mix of this nature center. So Sarah, I'm going to ask that you talk a little bit about the nature center, please.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. And yeah, so just going back to the strategies. So we kind of worked through those strategies, and um the Bill of Rights really, I know a lot of cities have been working on that outdoor Bill of Rights. That has sort of really been like a foundational document for us. We go back to that when we're meeting with our partners. We go back to that when we're meeting internally as a staff, and that kind of guides a lot of our community programs. To the commissioner's point, our Earth Explorers program, a lot of the programs we did, we kind of retooled it to address the outdoor Bill of Rights and then to make events family friendly. So the Nature Center initiative came out of that initial work we did back in the day, and it's coming to fruition. We've literally broken ground. They're installing a geothermal system there now. The entire facility was an existing building that's being completely retrofitted and transformed into a nature space that will allow us to host school day programming. We're hoping to have after school programming, school age childcare facility there where kids can come after school and get care and exposure to nature, until their parents or guardians can pick them up. We have plans to do a summer camp at the location, and then we also want to have a bunch of community programs. So we've been working really closely. So we have a lot of partners at the table. The commissioner mentioned earlier the city school district. So in our city, the city and the school district are two separate entities. We try our best to partner together, but we have different leadership. So if anyone is involved in a city like that, it can be complicated. But Commissioner Green previously had worked in the city school district and was a leader in the district. We're also very lucky that our current mayor was in the district, part of the school board. So we have really good relationships. We all know how good it is when you can just make that phone call and try to move a conversation forward. It's not perfect, but so we're hoping to be able to have staff trainings there, teacher trainings there. Obviously, we want to host both district and homeschool groups at the site during the day. We're in conversation with the district. New York State is actually undergoing a change to our graduation requirements. They're going to have a portrait of a graduate, and we're looking to work with the science leadership to actually allow students to, and this is, if this happens, I'll be amazed, but I'll be so excited. But for students who need to get lab credit to actually do work at the Nature Center, do hands-on science or internships at the center and get credit. A lot of students, I don't know for folks in other states, but in our state, if you don't get those credits, you can't graduate. So making it more hands-on opportunities for high school age students, internship and paid opportunities to work there in the school year and in the summertime. We want to allow and enable educators to feel more comfortable. There's definitely a skill to this. Obviously, we're all professionals in this field, but it's not rocket science. I try to say this to folks that are intimidated by taking kids outside. we really want to try to work with teachers and educators, daycare providers to have them feel more comfortable, provide them with curriculum and ideas. Um, and then really, the cohort, we're trying to keep that document a living document, and we want to have that shape a lot of the programming that we do. So one of the cool things about the Nature Center is that we also worked with the designers. So there's a lot of outdoor classroom space where we can actually have teaching gardens, and we're having some native pollinator plantings. We're working on doing a Milwaukee forest pilot at the site. So we're trying to have some outdoor spaces that can also be used as classroom spaces. So it's very exciting. And this all came out of this work that we've been doing in partnership with the folks on this call and the organizations have been leading this work nationwide. And I feel very lucky. I'm not just saying this because she's on the call, but I feel very lucky to have, our mayor changes every 4 years, potentially commissioners change, but to have a handoff between leadership and have the full support to move this forward. And then also just say, ARPA funding really did kickstart this. Um, and so for the mayor to have that vision to say, nope, this is a priority, we're going to make this happen, is huge, especially as we look at, budgets being reduced. And so we're grateful that this already started. They can't take it away from us now. Um, and then I'll just say one other thing. We worked really closely also. So the city's Department of Environmental Services is kind of our sister department, and they got a grant through, I believe it's through the EPA. And so this building will also be a net zero facility. And that was kind of thinking about, okay, we got this grant, where would the best place be to do this? So having solar panels as demonstration, they're doing as I mentioned, they're doing a geothermal project at this site. So that just sort of serendipity led to that, but it's a great way to sort of show community members, heat pumps and those sorts of things. So pretty exciting. And then I will say that, the commissioner mentioned this also, but with the Nature Everywhere initiative and the team that we put together, it's been really important. Commissioner, you might know the exact number, but several tens of thousands of students are served through the school district. They spend a majority of their day in school district buildings. We see them after school, but in order for this work and Nature Everywhere to truly reach youth, but also kind of seep into curriculum and really be a part of just the ethos of what we want every kid in our city to experience, we need the district at the table. So they've, through commissioner pulling some some strings and making sure we have representation on our team from the school district. We have leadership from the city, obviously, and then we also just happen to have some great nonprofit groups. So the Rochester Ecology Partners is a great partner organization. It's a nonprofit specifically dedicated to nature-based learning that actually was started by a former city school district science teacher that had many years in the district, was a beloved teacher there. He's part of the team. So this is sort of the core group of folks that are working towards continuing this work in the city. And I don't know, yeah, I mean, as far as support from leadership, and I hate to say this because I know every city's different, but it's really been great to keep the commissioner up to date on this and, when possible, call in other leaders, say, hey, this is what the city's doing, we need the district to step up, and it doesn't always happen, but at least to be in those rooms and at those tables to say, hey, this is important. And we always joke, like, who's going to argue with bringing kids outside and getting kids exposed to nature, right? Like, anyways, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you,
Sarah.
Sarah and Commissioner Green. I appreciate giving some of that, hearing some of the background in Rochester. And I'd love to welcome our two other speakers that are joining us. So again, Sarah Milligan-Toffler, who's the president and CEO of Children in Nature Network, as well as Andrew Moore, who's the director of Youth and Young Adult Connections at the National League of Cities. Thank you both for joining us as well.
Happy to be here.
All right.
Great to be here.
Okay, so I have a question for you all. Something did come up already in the chat a little bit that kind of goes towards this, but do you have any advice for community leaders or organizations who might feel a little bit hesitant or even unsure about approaching city leadership?
One of the things I'll add is even when we talked about our Cobra, it was because we listened to the voice of the young people. I think it's so important to get our youth involved in decision making. Right now, we have a youth group who's looking at policy making and how did their voices get to the table. The Cobra was started with young people, and they took that to our city council to actually pass that the Bill of Rights, the Outdoor Bill of Rights. And so to help move the work, I think you have to have the voices of the young people when it comes to being outside. Sarah said it, who's going to fight arguing with being outside? And so I think having those voices, we talked about the first question was about leadership, and folks put in the chat about people listening to what's going on. You want to have the people at the table who's going to listen to it. Not everybody's going to agree with it, but at least compromise, collaborate, try to understand what's the best way to move forward for the sake of those who will benefit the most, which I say are our young people.
Yeah. Anyone else like to add?
I can say one thing on like just tag teaming what the commissioner said. So because we working in the city, it's a political environment, and there's certain I'm not allowed to directly email a council member, for instance. And there's certain conversations that maybe in my role or my staff aren't able to have, but by involving the community and specifically involving youth, they were able to get at the table. They could directly ask through the groups they're working with, through the nonprofits and the organizations, for a conversation with the president of council, or that sort of advocacy piece. So finding partners that have those ins, and kind of can advocate in that way while you're also advocating in the way that you can advocate, was particularly helpful with moving a lot of this around. Just getting at all the different tables.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Dr. Green. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to have you all here today and appreciate this important conversation. I think in terms of approaching institutional leadership, one thing that I always like to say is just to remember, and you can see this in Dr. Green and how you're showing up, Dr. Green. It's like, first and foremost, institutional leaders are people, right? And they care about their communities. And just remember that if you're feeling nervous about approaching folks, that you approach institutional relationships in the same way you approach other relationships. You look to build connection. You look to find out, Dr. Green, what does Dr. Green care about, right? And what are her issues? And if you don't know, you can ask her. And starting in those kind of spaces where you're looking to make connection, find out, to the earlier point that Melody raised about, shifting priorities. What are the institutional leaders' priorities? You can research that, you can ask them, and then you can, in the course of the conversation, think about how is connection to nature a solution to a problem that they're trying to solve. So those would be just a few of the ideas that I would share. But it's a relationship first and foremost, and think about it that way.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to this this theme about connecting with people as people. I recently heard the mayor of Chattanooga say, not everybody's going to be at your same starting point where, say, you're interested every day, all day in connecting children to nature. That may not be their starting point. So learn to speak their love language. Figure out what their priorities are. And I was going to illustrate it with an example. When we met the then mayor of Grand Rapids, actually months before she took office, she was passionate about connecting the people of her city back to the Grand River. She thought that people had gotten separated from that massive natural resource that, actually once had established Grand Rapids as a mill town back in the 19th century. So that was her passion that we could build upon, and it really worked. I'll say more about Grand Rapids, I think, as we go on.
And I think you were kind of getting to this point already, Andy, but is there anything in particular that people can do to make sure that nature access is more of a essential rather than like, oh, it's a nice to have, it's something extra that we do? Is there anything that you know from your experience that has really sold that?
I would start, this is one angle on it, is to think about, the big, as Sarah was saying, like, what are the challenges elected leaders or institutional leaders face? And, in many cities across the country, the issue of stormwater management is high on the list and requires big capital investments to tackle it. But working with schools and schoolyards, for instance, uh, or complete streets, green streets, that issue can be approached in a way that also connects children to nature.
Yeah. And Sarah, I have a question for you. I know, we talked about this a little bit, and I think Commissioner Green mentioned this too. We know that engaging decision makers is just as important as engaging your community members, right? Your community leaders. It can be very daunting for some people who may not have those relationships, or they may not know where to begin. So I'd love to know more about like how you have helped secure some of these champions.
Yeah. I think a couple of things that I would say, I think it's most important, and it was being stated in the chat, and Commissioner Green, you were talking about, how do we center youth voice in all of this? And I want to start by saying that we need to really be reflective and centering those voices. And if we want to move good ideas forward, we need the powers that be to be champions for that, and to be partners in carrying that work forward. If we want to, have funding and other supports, policy and things that are going to be, make those solutions durable. So absolutely need institutional leadership, and that's, hopefully, you've got leadership that is, that shares the value of centering community voice. An idea that, an example that comes immediately to my mind is actually the start of this initiative came from an outreach that I did to then Mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota, Chris Coleman, who was coming in as the chair of the National League of Cities. This was back in 2014, I believe. And I because over the years I had gotten to know the mayor, and I knew that this connection to nature was something that was important to him. He championed it for the city of St. Paul, and he had his own personal story. I mean, he says his outward bound experience, but for that he wouldn't, run his own household. It just, like, does not. It changed his whole trajectory in life. And I knew it was a big ask, but I also knew Chris well enough to know that it was an issue he cared about. And I asked him, if he would make connecting children to nature, the platform for his year as chair. And being the kind of leader that he was, he said yes. I knew I was going to have to do all the work like that he wasn't going to, he was going to open the door, and then, if I could make it happen, then he would support it. And, that led to what's now been a really, productive and joyful, partnership with the National League of Cities for the last 10 years. And, prior to that, Andy, you could speak to this, but I don't think there was anybody over there in your shop that was thinking about connection to nature as something that was relevant for city leadership. So, think about the difference that one yes, made. So, and he could have said no, and then I would have gone back to the drawing board and figure out who else I was going to call. That's how that goes. But you never know if you don't ask. I was going to just share one other quick story. A couple of years ago, a new director of parks was selected for the city of Atlanta, and I live in the Atlanta area now, and I saw that the parks director was moving his family here from Seattle, and I just reached out to him and I said, I'd love to host an open house for you and your family when you get to town to introduce you to people. And, that became a foundation for future conversations. And he's now working to, move green schoolyards and green school parks forward in the city of Atlanta. And so sometimes it can be those connections outside of what you want to ask for, and offering to do some, a kindness for someone. And I included his wife and his children, and, and they really appreciated that gesture. So those are a couple of examples, Christian.
Thank you. So Commissioner Green, I have a question for you. So we talked about this new resource we put together. So these pledges of support resolutions or proclamations, and it's really to make sure that you develop and kind of deploy some high-level public champions or sponsors. And it's really the belief that engaging decision makers can really bring about those different outcomes. I'd love to know more about how you interpret your role as a champion of nature everywhere, and share more about that and how you feel like you've been in charge of that.
So I think it's important that the leader embraces this work. So Sarah mentioned that my background, I spent almost 30 years in education. And so I had a connection to kids, the community. But when I came over to the Department of Recreation and Human Services, and I got to know the leaders within my department and understood where their passions were, I began to understand their work. I grew up here in Rochester. I remember saying to Sarah when I joined, tell me about parks and playgrounds. She was like, oh, there's over 50. And I said, wait a minute, I've been here all my life. What are you talking about? And so I did a road show with Sarah, and we went to several of the parks, spaces that I didn't even know existed. And I remember taking a picture and posted it on social media and said, do you know where I am? People thought I was outside of Rochester. I was at a place called Lower Falls that people really didn't know about. And so I began to understand why this was important, because I had leaders who was championing this work. I had not heard of the Outdoor Bill of Rights. And so Sarah's team showed me that, talked about how that was created. When I heard that young people created that, I knew that I needed to get on board. And so as a leader, we have to open those doors. We have to remove barriers and do what's right for the community. The mayor, he has this initiative of like 2,500 trees and new trees in 3 or 4 years. And so I'm like, okay, the mayor's looking about trees. That means outside. How do I connect his wishes with the work within the Department of Recreation and Human Services and champion it, because I saw the passion. And then when I go to rec centers and members of Sarah's team is doing Earth Explorers activities and seeing the excitement of the kids, they would take me outside and show me the gardens they're growing, how to pick vegetables off the garden in their neighborhood. That wasn't just for the rec center, but for the community. And so when you see young people and adults who have a passion for the work, how do you connect what you know to that work? And so that's how I have been able to champion this work. When Sarah would say, we need a partnership from the district, let's reach out. I would go to those folks that I used to work with and say, hey, here's an opportunity. We want you to be a part of it, but guess who's going to benefit it? The kids in the school system. And so I think those are some of the things that we have to do, that champion it for those who's going to benefit. And that's been the work that I've done. When Sarah talks about funding, it started with ARPA. As we were going on, I'd hear, we have a gap. We don't have enough money for this part of the building. What are we going to do? We don't have enough money for the playground. What are we going to do? And then, because of the passion that many of our leaders here in the city have, then we can go to our counterparts in the Department of Environmental Services and our mayor and our county officials, our city officials, to say this is why this is important. And that's why you see that picture, groundbreaking has happened. No one's putting the brakes on it because we might not have all the money, because now they see the value. And what Sarah talked about is the connection to not just having a place sitting somewhere. We're going to have that place operational throughout the day. When kids are in school, bring kids out. Come over to the Nature Center. There's at least a half dozen schools right in the area of the Nature Center. Let's work with those schools first, because what I know is when kids talk about it and they tell their neighbors and teachers tell their teachers, it will spread by word of mouth.
Yeah. I wanted to just jump on what you're talking about, Commissioner Green, and take it back to this action challenge, the Nature Everywhere action challenge that we're encouraging anyone on the phone to today to consider signing up for. And by the way, we have a instructional course available free for cities and their partners who come forward for that. But this is the part. What Rochester did so beautifully is to lay down a platform with its co-board, with the leadership support, and that's the level we're talking about. This is a longer march, and it's not going to be overnight that other cities get to the place where Rochester is, with 2 or 3 strategies working and that sort of thing. So we're recommending, as an early step in the process, getting that a formal public pledge of support or something like that, and then you can build from there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you all for sharing everything that you have so far. I do want to give some time for folks to ask a few questions. Andy, thank you for referencing the course as well. I just put a link for that in the chat. But yeah, we have about maybe 8 to 10 minutes here to answer a few questions. If anyone is interested to either ask in the chat or raise your hand and get off mute, we are open to both.
I would also just maybe add, Christian, as people are maybe thinking about questions, if other folks on the call have really good examples of ways that you've engaged institutional leadership that might benefit others on the call, we'd love to hear about that as well.
Christian, I saw a question in the chat, if you don't mind. When you talk about how do we get youth involved, I'll start, and Sarah, I'll ask you to add on. But we have, within the Department of Recreation and Human Services, as I mentioned, we have 10 recreation centers. So we have youth in those recreation centers that are working on leadership. We have what's called Youth Voice One Vision, which is a leadership group within our division. And they have presidents and they have officers within there. And so we tap those leaders to say this is the work that we want to do. And they then share that information in the recreation centers. They pull together those group of young people. And so they're young people who want to be part of it, similar to what our policy task force right now. The Youth Voice One Vision group helps us to pull in strong voices within the community. Those folks are the ones who's leading the work. And then it's the adults who massage it, work with them so that they can take that then to city council. Sarah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about youth, how you got the youth together.
Yeah, to the Commissioner's point, there was that group in the city, the Youth Voice One Vision, and then we also our zoo has like a zoo society, like a Friends of that also had a teen program, so a teen employment program that youth could work at the zoo or volunteer. And so to kind of try to make it so we're the largest, obviously, municipality within the county, but like to try to make it a county city joint, we got those kids together from the county, from the zoo group, and then we did a couple team building activities, including doing some like primitive skills workshops. We took them out. We did like a team building, fire building sort of thing. So, and then I think it was over a couple different sessions where we fed them. Obviously, also food is important. A couple different sessions engaging them that way. But I know also, not every city has that, but libraries like our teen librarian was super helpful also, and kids who, come there and are engaged in some of the stuff happening at the library. So, and then some of the local schools also have like student government organizations that some of those kids kind of cross over. They're in the Youth Voice One Vision or they're employed, but all of those groups were super helpful in kind of specifically that middle school teen demographic.
All right, so we have another question in the chat. Would love to hear suggestions for building relationships with school districts when you don't have an existing connection. Yeah.
So, I think it's about, even if you don't have the personal connection, I think you got to knock on the door. I would say that even if I didn't have the relationship with the folks that I do in the district, because the work is so important, I would be willing to keep knocking on the door. Not only myself, but having young people in the school district going out to speak for you. In my 29 plus years with the school district, what I learned is people will listen to the voice of a young person. And so when you find passionate young people, let them go and speak in front of your city council, your school boards, so that they understand this is not about an adult. This is about what kids need and want. And when you talk about resources, we all know that the funding is an issue. ARPA dollars helped us move this project forward. But realistically, we know that without those ARPA dollars, we probably would not be where we are today. Again, it's about what's the value that the leadership has in that community. And if they see that as a priority, they will find the funding. I can say that within our department, when we see those priorities, we continue to raise the voice. Our Youth Voice One Vision, I tell you, the mayor, the city council, when I say the youth want to come to the city council meeting, the youth want to have a meeting with you, Mr. Mayor, they are often ready to hear it. I've never been told, no, you can't bring the youth for us to hear what they have to say. So utilize your young people in your community. They're the power for the next generation.
I'll say one other thing too. We also, in this community, again, we have lots of problems in Rochester. So this is one thing we're doing really well, but there's lots of issues. So I don't want to sound like we've got it all figured out. But again, going to that advocacy piece, we had a couple local like nonprofit groups that specifically engage community members and parents or guardians of students. And they have been really helpful as well because they can really take on that advocacy role, whereas like a city employee, you're not necessarily able to advocate at city council, but getting parents or guardians involved because they see the value, or some parents see the value of kids, the links to like better physical health, better emotional, better behavior in school, like all of these, almost like we said, coming at it from the thing that the leader is passionate about. Maybe the way that you pitch it to a school district is going to be different than the way you pitch it to a nonprofit. But one of the big things in our community right now is social emotional health, and like making sure that like students' mental health is primary and focused on. And so like all the benefits we all know of nature connection. And if that's the way that we get the district or specific leaders to support the initiative, but having that parent group or community grassroots neighborhood organization that can really advocate is huge for us, because they say all the things we can't say but want to say. That's super helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy, too. I see that you're sharing some resources. We do have a little bit of time left just to finish up the slide, so I apologize if we missed any questions. A few resources have been shared. If anyone has a chance to look through and see if you can have any responses for any of those questions, I appreciate it. But I'd love to wrap up and share a few details on the action challenge itself. So if you are planning to start these relationships, start these conversations with leaders in your community, or if you've already done that, if you have already done this work and you've started and you may want to get recognized for it, that is what the Action Challenge was made for. So the Action Challenge is a self-paced approach to advancing equitable access to nature everywhere children live, learn, and play in your community. And how do you join? You just need to form a 3-person cross-sector team. That would be a team that includes people from different organizations. And of course, if you have a connection to school leadership and institutional leadership or city leadership, that would be great as well. But that is, it could be anyone that is, a community leader, city departments, school, or other partners committed to connecting children to nature. Ideally, we do have a 2025 goal. That's that 100 communities by the end of this year. So if you can join us soon, that would definitely be appreciated. But you can continue to work on these actions beyond the year. Some of the actions that relate to today's conversation, I think Andy touched on this a bit. Obtaining a pledge of support from a local official. So that's a mayor, a city manager, or school superintendent. That's that co-board that we talked about. That is a pledge of support or even a resolution. Additionally, that's creating or improving a policy, resolution, or budget allocation that advances equitable nature connection at the city, school district, or utility district level. And then all you have to do is register. The registration process is very, very simple. I tried to make it as easy as possible. And if I could automate it, I would, but it does have to go to me. And I do just make sure that you do have those 3 people on your form. But it's very simple. Let us know who's a part of your team. Let us know why you're interested in joining the Action Challenge. And then as long as you have those 3 people, you are a part of the Nature Everywhere communities. You'll start to receive all those great resources. So what are the benefits of registering and joining the Action Challenge? So we understand that everyone's schedules may be filled, your career, your family, every other thing that you may have commitments to. And so the Action Challenge really lets you go at your own pace. And we want to make sure that everybody is able to join us. You also receive recognition or opportunities to receive promotion on a national scale. We have a Nature Everywhere Communities map. We can put you on the pin and talk about what your community is doing, what partners you have, and things like that. And you also get access to tools and resources that are not available to the public. And there's an opportunity to network with other communities doing similar work. We have over 80 plus communities that join us in different events similar to this. And you get access to our monthly lunch and learn, where is an opportunity for people to share resources, talk about the work that they're doing, talk about some of the struggle or some of the challenges that they're facing, and see if there's anyone in the conversation that can help them. So I love those calls. And then every other month, we have calls just like this where we have guest speakers talking about the work that they're doing, and highlighting an action or something that is supporting nature-based strategies. So if you want to have access to more of these conversations, definitely join the Action Challenge. So one of those resources that is on the screen right now is our nature prioritization maps. So every single team member that joins or every single team that joins gets access to this. This is something that's supported by our partners at Kaboom as well as NatureQuant. So we provide you this mapping data information for your location, whether that's a neighborhood, whether that's your state, potentially region as well. And it kind of gets you to focus on the space that needs it the most. So as it shows here, the darker areas really indicate the higher need. There's less play equity and there's less access to nature, but there are more children in the area. So you receive this at registration. All right. So, and then there are many other resources available as well on our website right now. You can go and see that. We have access to guides that we've built to support people doing this at their own pace. So, what does it mean to build a successful cross-sector team? So, if you're not sure who to involve in your team as you register, there's a guide for that. We always say to start to look at the landscape. What's available right now? What programs are running? Who's running them? If there's institutional leadership that is in your area that you may or may not, you may want to connect to, what is it that their priorities are, right? Like think about what policies are out there and see if they want to be a part of your team. See if you can expand with those programs and partners. Pledges of support, I talked about that a little bit. Community engagement guide, how do you engage community? And then many, many, many more guides that are available right now. You don't need to register to get them, but those are available on the website that's listed in the chat. And yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So what's next? Either you have already built your cross-sector team and you can register, or you can look at our Building a Cross-Sector Team guide and think about who you'd like to join the Action Challenge. And then you just receive those resources and access to those events. And we'd love to recognize you for those efforts. And a couple of things that come up for recognition that are not listed here, but being a part of our Nature Everywhere Communities map. So that's over 80 communities right now that are on our website. You can click and see what they're focused on, what work they've completed already, who are their partners, how do we talk to them? There was a couple questions in here about who's done this work before and how do I connect with them or see some examples maybe. So you have access to doing that as well. We can support you on building a press release. We can support you on adding you to one of our newsletters. There are many, many things. We can support you on helping design a banner or a sign. If you've built something in your community that you want to have a sign developed, we can help you build that as well. Or if you host a lot of community events and you'd love to have like a banner for your table or have it hanging at the event somewhere, we can help you design that as well. So those are just some of the few resources that are available to people that may want to join us on the Action Challenge. If you want more information, my email is here on the screen, but you're also going to receive a follow-up from me that has the resource of this recording. You'll also get the slides, and you'll just be able to send me an email if you have questions. I would much rather you send me an email if you have questions than think that you may not be a part of this work. So yeah, that is what I have for you now. And then the very last thing is I'd love for you to take a few seconds here. It's very quick for questions. You could either scan this QR code or we should have a link in the chat in a second that should give you access to the survey. And it's just 4 quick questions. Let us know how we did. And if you want me to contact you, that is also an option to share in your email there, and I can follow up with you as well. I do want to thank our speakers, Commissioner Green, Sarah from Children in Nature Network, and Sarah from Rochester as well, and Andy Moore for being here. It was great to learn from you and hear from you. And I also want to thank everybody in the chat for participating in the chat. And you guys are great. I just we'll be here for another second or so, but thank you so much for being here.